The wind howled across the rocky cliffs where the outpost stood, an ancient fortress built from stone and steel. Its towers reached into the clouds, holding secrets that many feared to uncover. To strangers, the fortress looked abandoned, a place left to crumble with time. But for those who lived within, it was a shield against the world's dangers not far beyond the outpost. A storm of war was coming. Armies marched in silence, and unseen creatures stirred in the darkness. In the middle of this rising tension, a young woman arrived, her steps heavy with the weight of revenge and survival. She was no ordinary traveler. Her eyes glowed with determination, and her blade gleamed in the fading light. She had lost everything, her family, her people, her home. All had been burned in a single night by soldiers who wore no name, only masks of iron. The outpost was the only place left for her. They said its walls could not be broken. They said the fortress had stood for 100 battles, never falling. She did not come to hide. She came because the ones she hunted would come here too. And when they came, she would be ready. As she walked past the gates, guards looked at her with suspicion. They saw only a lone girl with scars on her arms and a blade too heavy for her frame. But behind her quiet gaze burned the fire of someone who had already faced death and refused to bow. Inside the fortress, the world was alive. Traders sold weapons, hunters boasted of kills, and soldiers sharpened their spears. The outpost was a city hidden inside a fortress, where power was currency and loyalty was fragile. The girl moved silently through the crowd until she reached the old inn. She ordered nothing, only sat near the shadows listening. She had learned long ago that listening gave more power than shouting. Across the hall, men whispered about the coming war. They spoke of strange creatures, not human, seen in the forests. Some said they were shadows with eyes. Others said they were demons from forgotten legends. The girl listened carefully. She knew these whispers were not lies. She had seen them with her own eyes when her village burned. Night fell, and the fortress grew quieter. Yet in the silence, she felt something stir. Her hand gripped the blade. Footsteps approached her table. A tall man with armor dented by years of war stood before her. His voice was low and heavy. "You don't belong here," he said. She looked at him but did not answer. "You carry yourself like a fighter," he continued. "But the outpost does not welcome those who come with secrets. Tell me why you're here." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "I am here for the same reason you are," she said softly. "To survive what is coming." The man's eyes narrowed. He studied her like a puzzle, then finally gave a small nod. "War is at our door," he said. "If you can fight, you'll find a place here. If not, you'll be swept away." She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. "I did not come to find a place. I came to finish what was started." Outside, the sound of horns echoed through the night. The guards shouted from the walls, and the fortress stirred awake. The girl rose from her chair, her hand on her sword. She knew this was no ordinary alarm. From the cliffs beyond, shapes moved in the mist. Soldiers in black armor with torches. In their hands, their banners stained with the mark of the enemy. Behind them came shadows that did not walk like men. The outpost had stood for 100 battles. Tonight it would face one more. And she, the last of her kind, would meet the war head-on. The horns echoed across the cliffs, shaking the stone walls of the outpost. People rushed through narrow streets, soldiers gathering at the gates while children were pulled into hiding. The fortress had faced raids before, but this alarm carried a weight that even the oldest fighters felt in their bones. The young woman, silent, watchful, moved quickly toward the outer wall. She had expected this moment, though not so soon. The black-armored soldiers of her nightmares had finally come, and with them, the shadows that stalked behind fire. Her grip tightened on her blade, the scars on her hands burning as if they remembered the fire that had once consumed her home, On the battlements, the commander of the outpost barked orders. He was an older man, scarred and heavy in armor, his voice carrying like thunder. "Archers, ready, shields to the front." His men obeyed without hesitation, but the sight below chilled even their seasoned hearts. The enemy camp stretched across the valley floor, torches burning like rivers of fire. Their soldiers lined up in endless rows, but worse were the shapes that moved in the darkness, beasts with twisted bodies, taller than horses, eyes glowing faintly like embers. Whispers ran through the defenders. These were no ordinary foes. They were creations of dark craft, summoned from beyond the known world. The girl pushed her way onto the wall. A guard tried to stop her, but she stared at him with such intensity that his hand froze on her shoulder. "I've faced them before," she said simply. He stepped aside, uncertain, yet unwilling to argue with eyes that carried too much truth. The commander noticed her. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Someone who has seen what's coming," she answered, "and someone who will not run." His scowl deepened, but there was no time for questions. The enemy horns blasted, and the valley erupted in motion. Soldiers advanced with shields raised, their formation precise, while the monstrous creatures lumbered behind, shaking the ground. With each step, the first arrows flew from the outpost's walls, a storm of steel raining down. Some found their mark, piercing enemy shields and armor. Men screamed and fell, but the creatures hardly slowed. Arrows stuck in their thick hides like splinters, and they only roared louder. The clash began at the gates. Enemy soldiers smashed against the fortress walls, ladders rising as they tried to climb. The defenders pushed them back with spears, poured boiling oil, and cut down the ladders. Still, the wave did not end. For every soldier that fell, two more took his place. Girl stood ready among the defenders. Her blade gleamed under torchlight, a weapon older than it appeared. When the first black-armored warrior climbed the wall, she moved with sudden speed. Her strike was clean, her blade slicing through his throat before he even realized she was there. Blood sprayed and the body fell. The men beside her froze for a moment. She was no ordinary fighter. Her movements were sharp, trained, and filled with a cold fury that burned brighter than fear. She cut down the next attacker, and then another, her hands steady as if she had done this 1,000 times. The commander shouted above the chaos, "Hold the walls! Do not break!" But below, the ground trembled. One of the great beasts charged the gates, its body slamming against the wood and iron with terrifying force. The entire wall shook. Soldiers stumbled, some falling from their posts. The girl looked down, her heart pounding. She had seen this before. These creatures could tear through entire villages. The gate cracked. A second beast joined the charge. Horns smashing against the doors. Wood splintered, iron bent. The defenders panicked, rushing to reinforce the barrier. The girl's eyes narrowed. If the gate fell, the outpost would drown in enemies. She leapt down from the wall, landing with a roll inside the courtyard. Soldiers shouted after her, but she ignored them, running straight for the inner lines where weapons of fire were stored. She grabbed a torch, then 2 barrels filled with oil. With the strength of desperation, she rolled them toward the gate, her plan forming in seconds. As the beasts prepared another charge, she lit the first barrel and pushed it forward. Flames burst, spilling fire across the ground. The creatures roared, slowing but not stopping. The second barrel followed, exploding against the gate itself. The fire spread, black smoke rising. For a moment, the beasts hesitated, swinging their massive heads as the flames lit their skin. The defenders cheered, but the girl did not. She knew it was only a pause. Fire could slow them, but not destroy them. From the shadows, a strange sound rose. A whisper, not of human tongue but something older, darker. The girl froze. She knew that sound. Her blood ran cold. Somewhere among The enemy, a summoner, was calling, controlling the beasts with words of forgotten power. She looked back at the commander. "If we don't stop the one who commands them," she said, her voice sharp, "the fire won't matter. They'll break through." The old soldier stared at her, surprised that she knew what even he did not. Then he nodded slowly, as if realizing she was more than what she seemed. And so, the battle for the outpost had only just begun. The fire at the gate burned high, filling the night with black smoke. Soldiers coughed as they fought, their eyes stinging, but they did not stop. Arrows flew, blades clashed, and the walls of the outpost groaned under the weight of war. Yet the girl's attention was not on the beasts anymore. Her ears strained for the whisper that had crawled out from the shadows of the valley. She knew those words. She had heard them before, the night her village fell. They were spoken by a cloaked figure, standing far from the battle, controlling the monsters like puppets. That same presence was here now. The beasts were not wild, they were bound. And only the one who bound them could truly break them free. The commander shouted for her. "You, girl, what did you mean? Speak." She climbed back to the wall, her blade stained with blood. "They're not fighting by their own will," she said. "There is someone out there calling them. Find the summoner, and the beasts will falter." The commander narrowed his eyes. "And how do you know this?" Her jaw tightened. "Because I've seen him. I was there when they burned my people." The old man studied her, and for the first time, the harshness in his gaze softened. "Then you fight not only for us, but for vengeance." The wall shook again. One of the beasts roared in pain as fire licked across its skin, but still it pushed forward. The gate bent inward, splinters flying like arrows. Panic surged through the defenders. If the gate broke, the outpost would be drowned in steel and shadow. The commander turned to his captains. "Hold the gate as long as you can," he ordered. Then to the girl he said, "If you speak the truth, then you must find this summoner. My men cannot leave the walls. But you move like someone born for this." She met his eyes. "I'll find him." Without waiting, she leapt down once more, vanishing into the chaos of the courtyard. Smoke and fire made every breath heavy. But her mind was sharper than ever. She knew where to look. Summoners never stood in the front. They hid, cloaked in darkness, letting others bleed for their commands. If she could slip past the battle, she could cut the enemy's heart in one strike. She ran toward a side gate, where defenders were holding firm. A narrow path led down the cliffside, dangerous and half-broken, but it was her best chance. A guard blocked her way, shouting that no one could pass. She answered not with words but with a glance that told him she would go, no matter the cost. Reluctantly, he let her through. The path down was steep, stones sliding under her boots. Arrows whistled in the air, some missing her by inches. She crouched low, moving quickly through the shadows. Below, the enemy camp spread wide, torches burning in rows, the dark army pressing toward the fortress. And then she saw him far back from the front lines, cloaked in black. A figure stood with arms raised. His voice carried across the valley, in that same cursed tongue, and each word made the beast slam harder against the outpost's gates. Soldiers surrounded him, guards meant to keep blades like hers from reaching his throat. Her hand gripped her sword. Every memory of her village burning came alive, the screams, the fire, the blood. Rage burned inside her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Rage made mistakes. She needed to strike once, clean and certain. The girl moved along the shadows of the rocks, slipping closer to the enemy lines. No one noticed her yet. Their focus was on the roaring battle above. She crept like a wolf, eyes fixed on her prey. Step by step, she drew nearer, but then, one of the guards turned. His eyes caught the glint of her blade in the torchlight. He shouted, and suddenly all eyes were on her. The soldiers rushed forward, blades drawn. She spun into them, her sword flashing. The first fell, throat cut. The second swung at her, but she ducked low and drove her blade through his chest. Blood sprayed hot across her arm. The others closed in. She moved faster, each strike fueled by the fire of survival. Her body flowed like water, her blade singing through armor and flesh. Still, there were too many. She backed toward the rocks, breathing hard. The summoner's voice did not falter. His chants grew louder, the beasts slamming harder against the gate. The girl's heart pounded. She was close, but not close enough. One guard struck her shoulder with a blade, and pain flared white-hot. She gritted her teeth, refusing to fall. She countered with a savage slash, cutting him down. Her blood dripped, but her feet stayed firm. For a heartbeat, she saw the summoner's face as the hoods slipped back, a man pale as bone, his eyes black as coal, lips twisted around words that should never be spoken. He looked at her, and for the first time, his voice wavered. He knew she was coming for him. The girl raised her blade, her whole body shaking with fury. She pushed forward, even as the enemy closed around her again. The fate of the outpost, of everyone within its walls, now rested on whether she could reach him before the gate fell. Asterisk. The clash of steel and the cries of soldiers filled the night. The outpost still stood, but its gates were groaning, bending inch by inch under the weight of monstrous beasts. Fire burned along the valley floor, yet it was not enough to stop the dark army. High on the walls, defenders fought with every breath. Unaware that the true battle was being decided in the shadows below, the girl pressed forward, her blade dripping with blood. The guards that circled the summoner fought with merciless precision, but she was faster. She ducked under a spear thrust, cutting the man's legs from beneath him, then spun into another, her strike splitting his chest. Her shoulder throbbed from the wound she had taken, but her eyes never left the cloaked figure at the center of it all. The summoner lowered his hands for a moment, his chanting breaking. He looked at her with eyes black as coal, a faint smile twisting his pale lips. "So one survived," he said, his voice carrying even through the chaos. "I remember your village, I remember the flames." Her breath caught, but her fury burned hotter. "Then remember my blade," she spat, lunging forward. The summoner raised his hand, and suddenly the ground between them shivered. A wave of dark energy rippled outward, throwing her back. She hit the rocks hard, her sword clattering to the dirt. The air around him felt heavy, thick with something unnatural. His guards closed in again, their faces grim, their blades flashing. She rolled to the side, grabbing her weapon just in time to parry a strike aimed at her head. The impact rattled her bones, but she forced herself back to her feet. She could not hesitate. Every moment wasted was another heartbeat closer to the outpost's fall. The summoner's voice rose again, words twisting the air into something foul. The beasts at the gate roared louder, their blows striking with double the force. The fortress groaned, stone cracking. Above, soldiers screamed as ladders slammed against the walls. The girl's rage sharpened into focus. She darted between the guards, her blade cutting fast and clean. A slash across one throat, a stab through another's chest. Each movement was fueled by memory, her mother's cries, her father's last stand, her home reduced to ash. Tonight, she would end the man who had taken everything from her. She broke through the last line of defenders. The summoner stood before her, his arms raised once more, his face calm as though she was nothing more than a fly. She lunged, her sword flashing toward his heart, but his hand moved faster than expected. A dark barrier flared into existence, her blade striking against it with a sharp crack. The force reverberated through her arm, nearly making her drop the weapon. Sparks flew where steel met shadow. "You cannot touch me," the summoner said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your kind are weak. You cling to walls and stones, but we are the future. We are the fire that will burn this world clean." Her teeth clenched. "Then burn with me," she hissed. She struck again and again, each blow harder than the last. The barrier held, but cracks began to shimmer through the darkness. The summoner's smile faltered. Above, the commander of the outpost spotted her struggle. Though he could not hear their words, he saw her fighting alone against something beyond mortal power. He barked at his men to hold the gates, no matter the cost. In his heart, he knew the girl was the key. The summoner raised his other hand, summoning a spear of black flame. He hurled it toward her, the air screaming as it cut through. She twisted aside, but the spear grazed her arm, searing flesh. Pain exploded through her body, but she refused to fall. She charged forward, her blade glowing faintly now, as if the fury in her heart had awakened something buried within it. A cry that shook her very soul. She slammed the weapon against the barrier once more. This time, it shattered. The force of the break sent a shockwave across the valley. Torches flickered, soldiers stumbled, and even the beasts at the gate faltered. Roaring in confusion, the summoner staggered, his eyes wide. For the first time, he looked afraid. The girl raised her blade high, ready to strike. But before she could bring it down, he muttered another curse and vanished into a swirl of smoke. Her blade cut only empty air. She stood breathing hard, her body trembling, her arm bleeding, but the whispers had stopped. The beasts at the gate thrashed wildly without command, striking at anything near them, even the enemy soldiers. Chaos broke across the valley floor. The defenders on the wall saw it too. The commander raised his sword and roared, "Push them back! Drive them into the fire!" The girl dropped to one knee, exhausted but alive. She had not killed the summoner, but she had broken his hold. For tonight, the outpost would stand. She looked back toward the fortress, flames reflecting in her eyes. She knew this was only the beginning. The summoner would return. And when he did, she would be ready to finish what she had started. Dawn came slowly over the outpost. The first light of morning revealed a battlefield scarred by fire and blood. Smoke curled from broken siege ladders, and blackened corpses lay in heaps at the base of the fortress walls. The beasts that had once slammed the gates were gone, either dead or vanished into the wilderness after their master's hold had been broken. The defenders stood exhausted but alive, their armor dented, their bodies bruised, yet their spirits unbroken. The girl walked back through the gates, her steps heavy. Blood stained her shoulder and arm, and her blade dragged slightly in the dirt. Every movement ached, but she did not stumble. She would not let the soldiers see weakness. The commander was waiting in the courtyard, his armor scorched, his face lined with weariness. When he saw her, his eyes hardened, not with suspicion this time, but with respect. "You fought like one of us," he said. "Perhaps better than most of us." She gave a small nod, her voice calm though her chest still burned with pain. "I fought because I had no choice." "He will return." The commander studied her. "This summoner, you've seen him before." Her gaze darkened. "He burned my home. My family died by his hand. Every village he touches falls to ash. And now he comes for your fortress. If we do nothing, the outpost will share the same fate." The words carried weight. Soldiers nearby turned to listen, their faces grave. Many had whispered about her since the battle, wondering who she was, how she fought with such fury. Now they began to see her not as a stranger, but as someone carrying the same fight that awaited them all. The commander motioned for her to follow. He led her into the council hall, a room lit by torches, maps scattered across a long wooden table. Captains and elders sat waiting, their voices tense. They argued about how long the outpost could survive, how many supplies were left, whether reinforcements would ever come. When the girl entered, their eyes turned to her, some doubtful, others curious. "She claims the beasts were controlled," the commander said. "And she claims she faced their master before." One elder scoffed. "She is only a girl." How can we believe her word? Her hand gripped her sword. She did not raise it, but the steel rang faintly as it moved. You saw what happened, she said coldly. When I broke his chant, the beasts lost their will. If I had not, your walls would already be torn down. Silence filled the hall. None could deny the truth. The commander leaned forward. Then tell us what you know. Who is he? She closed her eyes for a moment, memories flashing, the night sky painted with flames, the chanting that made even the air feel poisoned, the pale face beneath the hood. He is not like other men. He calls himself a voice of the abyss. He believes the world is weak, that only fire can shape it into strength. I was a child when I saw him, but I never forgot. He is building an army, not just of soldiers, but of things born from shadow. And he will not stop until all who resist are gone. The room grew heavy. The elders shifted uneasily. The captains muttered among themselves. The commander's voice cut through. Then we must prepare. The outpost is strong, but if what she says is true, we are only the first stone in his path. We cannot wait for him to strike again. We must be ready to strike first. The council erupted in debate. Some argued to send for allies in distant cities. Others claimed no one would believe until it was too late. A few even whispered that the girl herself might be cursed, touched by the same darkness she fought. She listened in silence, her jaw clenched. She had heard such whispers before, but she did not waste breath on them. When the arguing grew too loud, the commander slammed his hand against the table. Enough. The outpost stands because we fought together. If this girl speaks truth, then she is not our enemy. She is our chance. The elders fell quiet, though doubt still lingered. Finally, one nodded slowly. Then she must prove herself. Further, if she is to stand with us, let her lead a hunt. Bring us proof of what she says. The girl's eyes narrowed, but she did not hesitate. I don't need your permission to hunt him. I'll find his trail, whether you send me or not. The commander gave a grim smile. Then perhaps it is fate that you came here. You will not go alone. I'll send men with you, scouts who know the land. If he is out there, we'll track him. She looked at him, weighing his words. For the first time since her village burned, she felt the faint stir of something more than rage, something like purpose. Outside, the sun rose fully over the cliffs, its light spilling across the fortress walls. The battle had been survived, but survival was not victory. The real war was just beginning. And the girl knew her path was now bound to the outpost. The wilderness beyond the outpost stretched wide and empty, a land of broken cliffs, deep forests, and rivers that shimmered silver under the sun. Few dared to travel there, for the paths were wild and filled with hidden dangers. Yet now the girl found herself leading a small band of scouts into those very lands, searching for traces of the man who had haunted her past. They moved quietly, 6 in total. 2 were hunters born to the forests, their eyes sharp for tracks. 2 were soldiers, veterans with spears and shields who knew how to fight as one. The last was the commander's chosen lieutenant, a man named Kale, whose scarred face carried both caution and pride. And then there was the girl, moving ahead of them all, her hand never far from her sword. For 2 days they tracked through the wilds. They saw signs of movement, trampled grass, burned trees, and strange black ash that seemed to seep into the earth like rot. The girl crouched often, touching the ground, feeling the weight of the land. Every mark confirmed what she already knew. The summoner's army had passed this way. On the 3rd day, they found the ruins of a village. Houses stood blackened and hollow, their roofs caved in. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, though the fires had long died. No bodies remained. The enemy had taken them or burned them where they stood. The soldiers stiffened, their hands tightening on their weapons. The girl walked through the ruins in silence, her heart heavy. The sight was too familiar, the same as her home, the same as every place the voice of the abyss touched. She stopped at a charred doorway, laying her hand on the scorched wood. Her voice was low but steady. "This is his work." Kale watched her carefully. "You speak of him as if you know his every step." She turned her gaze to him. "I told you I have followed his shadow for years. Wherever he goes, this is what he leaves behind." The lieutenant's expression hardened. "Then we cannot let him reach the next village. If he builds his army further, even the outpost may not hold." That night they camped by the edge of the forest. The moon hung pale and thin above the trees. The scouts whispered among themselves, unsettled by the silence that wrapped the land. The girl did not sleep. She sat alone, sharpening her blade, listening for the faintest sound. Near midnight, she heard it, the same low whisper she had heard on the night of the siege. It drifted through the trees like wind, though no leaves stirred. Her eyes snapped open. She rose without a word, following the sound into the shadows. Kale noticed and caught up quickly, his sword drawn. "What do you hear?" he asked. She raised her hand for silence. Together they moved deeper, the forest pressing close. The whisper grew louder, now joined by faint cries, not human but something twisted and pained. At last they reached a clearing where the ground itself seemed wrong. The earth was black, cracked as though burned from within, and at its center stood a stone altar covered in strange markings. The girl's jaw tightened. "This is where he calls them." Kale frowned. "Calls what?" Before she could answer, the ground shook. Shadows rose from the cracks, twisting into shapes that looked almost human, but their faces were stretched, their eyes empty. They screeched, rushing forward with claws that gleamed in the moonlight. The scouts back at the camp heard the cries and came running, weapons ready. The clearing erupted in chaos. Spears struck shadow, swords cut through mist like flesh, but the creatures did not fall easily. When one was cut down, it broke apart into ash and smoke, only to rise again, if not burned. The girl fought at the center, her blade flashing, each strike precise. She remembered the night her people had faced the same horrors, remembered how they fell because no one knew how to fight them. But now she did. "Fire!" she shouted. "Burn them!" The hunters lit torches, swinging them into the shadows. Flames caught, and for the first time, the creatures screamed in true pain. Their forms melted into smoke that did not rise again. One by one they fell, burned out of existence, until only the smell of ash lingered in the clearing. The soldiers panted, their bodies shaking from the fight. Kale leaned on his sword, sweat running down his face. "If he can summon these things at will," he said, "then we face more than just soldiers. We face an army that does not die." The girl sheathed her blade, her expression grim. "And this is only a taste. He is testing the land, feeding the darkness so it will grow stronger. If we do not stop him now, the outpost will not be the last fortress to fall. It will be the first." She turned to the altar, staring at the markings. Her fingers traced the symbols, and for a moment, her eyes burned with something fierce. "This is not just his magic," she said quietly. "These are marks of the abyss itself. He serves something older, something far greater than him." The scouts fell silent, fear pressing heavy on them. Kale looked at her, his voice low. "Then what hope do we have?" The girl lifted her gaze, her face hard as stone. "The hope we make with our own hands. He may serve shadows, but I serve memory, and I will not let this land burn as mine did." The fire from the torches flickered across their faces as the clearing lay quiet once more. But in that silence, each of them knew the truth. The war had only just begun. The next morning, the clearing felt lifeless. The altar stood cold and empty, its black symbols still carved deep into the stone. The scouts avoided looking at it, their faces pale. They had survived the night, but each man carried the weight of what they had seen: shadows that screamed, smoke that clawed, an enemy who could call death itself. The girl led them onward. She did not waste words, but her eyes scanned the land with sharp focus. Every broken branch, every mark in the dirt, spoke to her. She was hunting, and she would not stop until she found the Summoner. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. What they saw there froze even the veterans. Below, spread across the valley floor, was a vast encampment. Black tents stood in neat lines, banners of the abyss hanging from wooden poles. Hundreds of soldiers trained in formation, their armor gleaming dark. Among them moved more of the twisted beasts, chained and restless, their roars shaking the air, but worse still was the center. There, a massive pit had been carved into the ground, and from it rose smoke so thick it seemed alive. Around the pit, cloaked figures chanted, their voices low and haunting. The sound drifted even to the ridge, making the scout's skin crawl. Kale's voice was tight. This is not an army, this is a plague." The girl's hand clenched on her sword. Her jaw tightened as memories flooded her village, her family, the night of fire. This was the same evil, but now grown larger, more dangerous. "He's building his war," she said. "Every village he burns, every soul he takes, it feeds this. Soon it will spread beyond the outpost, beyond these lands." The scouts looked to her, fear in their eyes. One whispered, "We should go back," warned the commander. "The fortress must prepare," but the girl shook her head. "If we leave now, he will only grow stronger. By the time we return, this army may already be marching." Kale frowned. "Then what do you suggest?" "There are 6 of us. 6 cannot break an army." She turned to him, her voice low but certain. "Not the army. The heart. Cut the heart, and the body dies. We must reach him. End the summoner before his plague can spread." Her words struck deep. The scouts shifted uneasily, but none could deny the truth. If the summoner lived, no wall, no fortress, no kingdom would be safe. That night, they crept closer under cover of darkness. The valley glowed with firelight, shadows dancing across the black tents. Soldiers moved in shifts, but the chanting at the pit never stopped. The summoner was there. They could feel it in the air, heavy and foul, like smoke choking their lungs. Girl led them through the outer lines, moving like a shadow herself. They cut down a guard in silence, dragged his body into the dark. Step by step, they slipped closer to the pit. The ground shook as one of the chained beasts roared, yanking at its bonds. Its eyes glowed faintly red, its breath steaming like smoke. When they reached the edge of the pit, they saw him. The summoner stood tall, arms raised, his hood pulled back. His pale face glistened with sweat as he spoke the words of the abyss. Around him, other cloaked figures knelt, feeding their voices into his. The pit pulsed with dark light, flashes of twisted forms writhing below. Kale's breath caught. "He's calling more of them." The girl's eyes narrowed. Her hand gripped her blade so tightly her knuckles whitened. This was it. This was the moment she had hunted for years. She could almost feel her family's voices urging her forward. But before she could move, the ground beneath them cracked. The chanting rose, and from the pit-clawed hands emerged shadows rising. Dozens this time, their eyes burning like embers. The scouts stumbled back, fear seizing them. "Fight!" she shouted. Her voice cut the fear like steel. She leapt forward, blade flashing, cutting into the first shadow. It screamed, bursting into smoke as her steel met its form. The others followed, torches lit, spears thrust. The clearing erupted in chaos once more. The summoner's eyes found her through the madness. His lips curved into a thin smile. "I knew you would come," he said, his voice carrying like poison on the wind. "The last ember of a dead village. Do you really think you can stop fire with a single sword?" Her answer was her blade, raised high, glowing faintly once again, as if it carried the memory of her people. She charged forward, cutting through shadows, every strike carrying the weight of vengeance. Kale and the others fought to hold the creatures back, giving her a path. At last she reached the circle of cloaked figures. She cut one down with a single blow. Another fell to her second strike. Blood sprayed across the stones, breaking the rhythm of the chant. The pit shuddered, the light faltering. The summoner's face twisted, fury replacing his calm. He lifted both hands, and the ground erupted in flame. The girl barely leapt aside in time, the heat searing her skin. Still she rose, her blade steady. "You destroyed my home," she said, her voice low but sharp as steel. "But I am not broken. I am the fire that you made, and I will burn you." The summoner sneered, his dark power swirling around him. The valley shook, shadows rising higher, the pit glowing brighter. For a moment, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. The girl stepped forward, her sword gleaming, her eyes locked on his. This time, there would be no escape. The valley burned with shadow and fire. The pit glowed like the mouth of the earth itself, vomiting smoke and screams. The outpost scouts struggled against the tide of creatures, their torches flaring as they pushed shadows back into the dark. Kale's voice rang out, steady and fierce, though his arm bled from a deep cut. "Hold the line, don't let them through." But the girl's focus was only on one figure, the summoner. He stood at the edge of the pit, arms raised, his voice pulling power from the abyss. The ground shook beneath his chants, and every word seemed to twist the air into poison. His pale face glistened with sweat, his black eyes fixed on her like a predator. She advanced step by step, her blade glowing faintly again. Each strike cut down another cloaked follower, breaking the circle that fed his strength. One fell with a scream, another with a gurgle as her blade sliced through his chest. The chant weakened, cracks spreading through the rhythm. The summoner snarled, his calm broken. "You think you can stop me? You are a spark against the storm. I will drown this world in darkness, and you will watch it burn again." Her jaw clenched, her voice sharp. "I watched once, never again." He hurled a wave of black fire toward her. The air screamed, the ground splitting as the blast tore forward. She raised her blade, bracing for death, but the steel flared with light, brighter than before. The fire struck, and the blade absorbed it, glowing hotter, brighter, until even the shadows seemed to recoil. The summoner's eyes widened. Impossible. She lunged through the smoke, her sword crashing against his staff. The impact rang like thunder. Sparks of light and shadow clashed, filling the valley with a storm of fire. He staggered, then struck back with another blast of dark energy. She met it with her blade, each strike a battle of wills. All around, the scouts fought desperately. Kale saw what was happening and shouted to his men, "Keep the creatures back. She faces him alone." They obeyed, forming a circle of fire around the pit, buying her the ground she needed. The girl pressed forward, her sword cutting through his defenses. Every blow carried the weight of her past, the cries of her people, the flames that devoured her home, the vow she had carried in silence all these years. She struck not just with steel, but with memory. At last, her blade broke through his staff. The wood cracked, splintering under the force. The summoner stumbled back, fear flashing in his dark eyes. She did not hesitate. She drove her sword into his chest. His scream tore through the valley, louder than the beasts, louder than the shadows. The pit itself trembled, its light faltering as his body convulsed. Black smoke poured from his mouth and eyes, twisting upward, like a dying storm. Then, with one final cry, he collapsed, his form dissolving into ash. The pit went silent. The chanting stopped. The shadows froze, then crumbled into smoke that vanished into the wind. The chained beasts roared once, then fell lifeless, their bodies collapsing with earth-shaking thuds. For the first time in years, there was silence. The girl stood breathing hard, her sword buried in the dirt, her body trembling. Blood ran down. Her arm, her chest heaved, but her eyes stayed sharp. She had done it. The man who destroyed her life was gone. Cale approached, his face pale but resolute. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said. She shook her head slowly. "No, not over." This was one voice. He called himself a servant of the abyss. If there is one, there may be more. The scouts exchanged uneasy looks. They had seen enough to believe her. But Cale's grip tightened, steady and certain. Then, "We will be ready, and we will not face it alone." She lifted her gaze toward the horizon. The outpost stood far behind them, its walls scarred, but still strong. For the first time, she felt the weight of vengeance ease from her chest. She was no longer only a girl chasing shadows. She was a fighter with allies, a flame that would not die. The dawn broke over the valley, painting the smoke in gold. The war was not finished, but the first battle had been won, and as long as she still breathed, no abyss would claim this world without facing her blade.